All right, Chair, I have my devices rolling, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anthony. Good evening, and welcome to our regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission. It is Tuesday, October 5th at 6 o'clock. We are missing Commissioner Ingraffia, and we are down one commissioner, but we do have a quorum this evening. Thanks to Bill Roshan and Mike Rodriguez, so we are called to order. And we will begin with a moment of silence. All right, thank you. Do we have any Planning Commissioner announcements? Bill, you got nothing?
Nothing.
Okay, how about you, Mike? Anything?
Nothing as well.
All right. I don't have anything except hopefully we have some people applying for the position of another commissioner. And I think that closes on October 15th, if I'm correct. But perhaps Mr. Graham will inform us more about that later. So with no announcements, we'll open public comment period. This is a time for comments about anything that is not on the agenda, or if you can't wait for the items on the agenda to speak, you may speak now. Anthony, do we have anybody in the queue?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
All right, thank you. Then we will move right along. We have no presentations. So we will go to the consent calendar. We have the current and advanced planning processing list and approval of minutes from Planning Commission meeting of July 20th. Do we have any comments, questions, or need to pull either of those items? Seeing nothing, so we have a motion to approve the minutes for July 20th.
Motion.
Okay, I think we have a motion and a second.
Yes, I'll second that.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. And I think we can just say all in favor. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Moving on to our public hearing. We are back to 715 Embarcadero. And Cindy, you are up.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning Commission. This is a continued public hearing for the conditional use permit major modification at 715 Embarcadero Road. This item was previously heard by the Planning Commission at the September 21st, 2021 meeting, and it was continued to tonight's meeting. And I'm going to share my screen before I get ahead of myself here. There it is. Okay, now you can see the screen. So yes, this is the continued public hearing item, and the location is shown on the vicinity map on the screen before you. Since the September 21st meeting, the project description is unchanged. The major modification request is to allow conversion of the commercial fishing wharf to public access by installing new harbor walk access where none currently exists. It also includes to install the required 10-foot wide harbor walk and an additional 10-foot wide fiberglass deck, removal of the existing outdoor patio and windscreen, interior changes to converting the fish processing area that's inside the building to retail, and last, create new street-facing public outdoor seating as shown on the project plans that are included in your staff report as two separate areas with a current proposal with a total of up to 6 tables. Here is the site plan images that you see before you, and excuse me, I missed a slide. So during the September 21st Planning Commission hearing, the Planning Commission continued the item with direction to the applicant to request revised plans and further detail regarding 3 main areas. And these are summarized on the screen before you. These include public seating, revised building elevations, and lease site connectivity. So with regard to item 1 on the screen, the Planning Commission requested that the plans include a table seating plan that delineated the number of tables that would be proposed. And in the project proposal, you have condition 13, which would prohibit table setup, so that this would be for public seating and not for the restaurant use. Condition 15 is added, which would require the tables to be affixed to the ground to minimize table creep or migration of the tables outside of the approved area. As to the south of the lease site is required view corridor, which would prohibit umbrellas to be in that area, as that would be a view corridor blockage. Regarding the issue of table umbrellas, at the September 21st meeting, the Planning Commission did not come to a consensus regarding whether they wanted a public color for those table umbrellas. That could be agendized as a separate Planning Commission agenda item, which staff can bring that forward to address Embarcadero-wide public furniture design for the table umbrellas and other things like bench seating. With regard to item number 2, building elevations, the Planning Commission requested revised plans to include additional facade articulation and addition of windows based on the Planning Commission's discussion really regarding the importance of the Harbor Walk in making that more of an inviting place for pedestrians and really promoting that as a desirable attraction to go out to the Harbor Walk. Staff is recommending condition 16. This is a new condition that would be added that would require a minimum of 15% of the square footage area of that retail unit the new retail unit that's proposed on the west elevation to be as glass, to really kind of, have it less of a walled off look and more of a revised, articulation. And then with item number 3, the Planning Commission requested clarification on the lease site connectivity between the Dutchman site and the Rose's Landing site, and a copy of the letter from the architect documenting the coordination that they did with the architect for Rose's Landing is included in your packet, and it confirms that it would meet accessibility requirements. So now, excuse me, here's the lease site. Site plan image. So it still shows that new Harbor Walk connection here on the left side of the screen, the left image, and then the area where the new retail space would be. On the right side of the screen, you see the table seating plan that they have included in the revised plans. And this shows 4 tables on the right side left side, and 2 tables on the right side. Plan sheet A 1.3 does include an alternate dining option if the Planning Commission decides that this is too many tables. That shows an option of 3 tables on the left and 1 table on the right. On this slide, you see the revised elevation with the addition of 2 windows on the west elevation, which is where the red arrow is pointing. And the image on the bottom right side of the screen just shows a zoomed up image of that. And after the Planning Commission packet was posted, it occurred to me that it might be more helpful to see the existing and proposed. So I did add a slide just before the meeting started. So I apologize if that's not in your packet, but this is a slide here that shows existing and proposed. So in the bottom right of the screen, you see that original elevation that you reviewed in September, and then the revised plans showing the addition of 2 side-by-side windows. And then again, the revised proposed north elevation, and this is where the door would be for the tenant space. And you see the revised changes, and again, I added a slide here just so you could have a better sense of the existing and proposed elevation pages from the September meeting. And the applicant has not proposed any further changes to the elevations just because the tenant for the retail space has not yet been identified. And as that particular tenant is identified, the window placement may slightly change based on configuration of their interior space configuration needs, merchandise, et cetera. So the next couple of slides show the lease site as it currently is, and Planning Commission did previously talk at the September meeting regarding the proposed street-facing public seating. The image on the left is an image that was provided by the applicant, and that was shown in the September PowerPoint image. The slide on the right shows, that was a picture taken today, and I included an additional slide here with some additional pictures that were taken today that show what the tables look like currently. So as of today, there are currently 3 tables on the left, and there are no tables on the right, as you can see here on the right side. It's just the potted plants. And one thing that staff wanted to point out, and this is not addressed specifically in the staff report, but this could be one area for Planning Commission consideration and discussion tonight, is the previous concern discussed by Planning Commission with regard to the appearance of the plaza area and whether or not, with the addition of tables and umbrellas and the potted plants, if that was contributing to a cluttered appearance, or if there was a desire by the commission to add a condition perhaps to remove the additional potted plants. Staff is proposing that a condition be added to permanently affix the tables to the ground. That would prevent any table creep or table migration outside of the area. The plans do show a vertical access corridor width of 10 feet, which would, keep tables outside of that area. But that is something that I would offer to Planning Commission to discuss is what option you would like to see for the tables. So here on the screen on the right side, I'm showing what that optional table layout of 3-in-1 looks like. It's shown in the plans on plan sheet A1.3. But that would reduce the number of tables and correspondingly, of course, number of umbrellas. But that is for Planning Commission consideration if you want to reduce the number of tables. In addition, we did receive public correspondence regarding preservation of the wharf, and Planning Commission also discussed this at the September 21st meeting, although there was no consensus reached at that meeting regarding specific preservation of the wharf, including the hoist. Planning Commission discussed, really the historic nature and retaining a piece of that Morro Bay commercial fishing history. One thing that staff would offer is that options for Planning Commission consideration tonight could be either one, of course, accept the application proposal as is, or potentially preserve the hoist and decking for reuse or repair purposes, or alternatively donate to the Maritime Museum for future uses to be determined. And that is another aspect for consideration tonight. So with the project revised as is and as conditioned, staff's recommendation is to forward a favorable recommendation to the City Council as a combined concept precise plan approval, which means that Planning Commission would forward that recommendation and then City Council would take final action on the CUP. So staff's recommendation is to adopt Resolution 1821 for this CUP major modification before you tonight and shown on plans received September 29th. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Cindy. Nice and comprehensive as always. Do we have any questions for staff tonight? Nothing from Bill. I don't see Mike's hand up. So we will go into public comment. And Anthony, do we have anybody with their hand up for public comment?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. I see one hand up, Kathy Novak.
Welcome, Kathy.
I have unmuted you, Kathy.
Good evening, everyone. Again, for the record, my name is Kathy Novak, and I'm here tonight representing the applicant for the 715 Embarcadero project. Thank you for all your comments at the last meeting and the opportunity to make some project modifications to address all of this. Staff has again done a good job on outlining the specific items that the Commission wanted to see and provided the information how we will address each item and or including conditions of approval for all of this. As a side note, the applicant is supportive of the conditions that have been added. Rather than spending time on the changes, I would like to address some of the comments that were received. First, one letter commented there will be 4 tables on one side and 6 on another, and as staff has mentioned, that is incorrect. There is a total of 6 tables with a 4-and-2 configuration. Second, there was mention that the umbrellas would exceed the view corridor height limit and that they have tipped over due to wind. The project as proposed and now conditioned will keep the umbrellas out of the view corridor, and with the tables fixed to the ground, it should take care of this problem. The other letters pertain to preservation of the wood wharf, hoist, or crane, if you want to call it that was previously used by the fish processing operations. First, I would like to note there were photographs of the harbor walk to the north and how sterile it appears. We must remember that this was required by the city to install the fiberglass grating, a 10-foot wide walkway, railing types, and the ramp was done to meet ADA standards. The project as proposed maintains the wood deck in the existing patio area, but included fiberglass grating and composite wood decking on the wharf and the new harbor walk area, as we believe that the city would have required this for the project to remain consistent with previously approved projects. In addition, the Coastal Commission and Army Corps of Engineers typically require projects such as these to install the fiberglass grate on any newly created area that is close to or over the water. So please, in your discussions tonight, please recognize that there may be other agencies that will require the fiberglass grate, and we will not be able to change this. In regards to keeping and maintaining the existing wood wharf and hoist, we told the Commission at the last meeting it would be very costly to repair the wharf and hoist. Our estimates show this will be at least $150,000 and maybe more. This additional financial burden is pushing this project over the tipping point that is beginning not to make sense. We all recognize that some folks may want to see this wharf restored, and other ideas that may include removing a portion of the wharf, relocating the hoist to the new proposed area, and potentially keeping some of the wood deck boards for future use. In anticipation of this discussion tonight, I spoke with the folks at the Maritime Museum to see if they would be interested in the wood deck boards and the hoist as a way to preserve this off-site. The museum would be interested in taking the deck boards if it is feasible for them to store the materials for future use. They are currently working on expansion plans, so we do not have a timeline on when this work would be done for them or when they could use the boards. Second, I will add that it's not always possible to salvage the boards in long lengths when they're removed because of the long and large nails that are used to secure them to start with. So if we're going to look into this concept, we need to acknowledge that some of the boards may be beyond usefulness and that the museum will need to provide the final word on whether they can use the materials. As far as the hoist, the museum folks are not really interested because the size of the hoist would take up too much of their limited space for displays. The hoist occupies approximately 25-foot by 17-foot area for the support legs and the boom, so this would be a significant loss of area for the museum. Next, I'd like to address the relocating of the hoist closer to the east and for it to become part of the new wharf area. As I mentioned, the hoist would take a considerable space, and if it were removed and a railing installed around the base to prevent people from climbing on it, it would be too close to the building and we would not be able to meet the city standards of a 10-foot wide harbor walk. To address one comment that may come up tonight, and if this is in regards if the hoist was relocated in the new wharf area, and whether we could accommodate the hoist plus keep the 10-foot wide harbor walk. The answer to the question, again, would be it would be very costly. The proposed wharf is planned in such a way as to not add too much area cantilevered over the existing piles that would require heavier bracing to support the additional load. As planned now, the 3 existing piles should not require the wood deck boards to be removed for the repair because they can use an epoxy jacket wrap around the existing piles to repair them. If there's additional wharf area beyond these 3 piles as proposed, it would be necessary to sleeve the piles instead. The cost for sleeving the piles will also rise due to the potential encountering rock riprap that is around these piles, which must be moved in order to drive the pile sleeve. So in conclusion and respectfully, asking the applicant to keep this additional wharf area on the hoist is not a cost-effective option for them for now or in the future for maintenance purposes. The city is gaining an important public benefit with this project about 10 years sooner than they would normally be required to, so I'm going to ask the commission to please consider this. We can't put a dollar amount on this early construction, but it certainly can be a part of the whole equation as we are evaluating this project. On behalf of the Van Buurens, I'd like to say I hope the commission is pleased with the modifications that we have done at your request, and you please provide a positive recommendation for approval as with the plans as presented to you tonight. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kathy. And stand by in case we have questions later. Anthony, do we have anyone else in the queue with some public comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair Stewart. I see Marty Travis with her hand up.
All right, Marty, welcome.
Okay, you are unmuted.
Oh, I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Marty, thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am Marty Travis from Dolphin Shirt Company. Once again, I want to thank those of you who met with us on site and for your attention to the situation. I do hope that you all read our most recent letter and took a look at the photos that we included. I wanted to reiterate tonight our main concerns regarding this project. We have been tenants at 715 Embarcadero for nearly 25 years. We've always enjoyed watching the people using the patio area that is located in front of our store and neighboring stores at 701 Embarcadero. It really is a fantastic place to step off the sidewalk on a busy day, linger a while, take photos, visit with friends. I see returning visitors there that really have a connection with the plaza, the mermaid statue, the memories they made there, and, you know, in all of the parts of Morro Bay. That is just kind of an iconic spot. But most importantly, we want to make sure that the area retains the public plaza and spacious walkway character that it has now. We also want to be sure that our employees and the public are safe from the large flying umbrellas. So we cannot stress enough the importance of requiring the umbrellas themselves to be fixed to the ground, in addition to the tables. We are in favor of the A1.3 table layout, which looks to us like it would be far less cluttered. It would allow the walkway to remain spacious, just give people some more moving around space there. It is our wish that some responsibility of the landlord be included in the conditions for the permit to keep it clean and smoke-free. As in my letter I stated, suddenly everybody wants to sit and smoke out there, which I don't even think is legal. But once again, whatever you decide, we do believe that there should be a stipulation requiring fixed tables and umbrellas. We are in favor of the A1.3 table layout and hope that you consider that. And we just wish for a safe, clean, and smoke-free public space as it's always been. And we hope you consider our comments, and I'm also happy to answer any questions.
There we go. Thanks, Marty. Do we have anybody else in the queue, Anthony?
Thank
For
you.
public comment.
Thank you, Chair Stewart. I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
All right, then we will close public comment. And if Ms. Novak could stand by. Mike, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I had a question for Mr. Chavez, Marty, but my hand was up, but didn't get to that point. I wanted to ask Ms. Chavez from the shirt company a question.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, is she still there?
Yes, she's still there.
I wanted to ask you this question directly, Marty, but do you think that with the table layouts, either one, do you think that it would directly impact your business?
Absolutely.
The use, enjoyment, and attractiveness of the buildings in that area. So I just wanted to ask you directly that question because that's one of the things that we need to consider.
It will and already has absolutely impacted our business.
Okay. So your preference then would be, if we're going to do something like that, to have the 3 table and the 1 table layout, right?
Yes.
That's okay, good. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. So we'll bring it back to the commission now. For discussion, any other questions for staff or for Ms. Novak? Let's see. I had some notes here. One response I would like to make, Ms. Travis, totally agree with you on the smoke issue. And some years back, the council actually, I think, maybe Mr. Graham can correct me if it was an ordinance, but we did have a no smoking on public sidewalk ordinance. Or do you remember what that was, Scott? Nothing. There were no signs, and there's no code enforcement of it. But
our municipal code prohibits smoking in public, basically. The issue would be enforcement from the city side of things. I mean, probably, the resource issue would be you're calling who's going out there to do that. Our code enforcement officer isn't here very much, 15 hours a week, and then PD has got their hands full with other things. So that is sort of the issue.
So one of the things I've always thought with that is nobody knows about it. So it's really a matter of signage. So perhaps on those tables, in addition to saying open to the public, we could have the little circle and the cigarette and the line through it, just to indicate no smoking there. I know I've actually put those signs on the light pole outside of my shop at times, and they get taken down. But I just think we need to let people know that's our expectation, and they can't know it if we don't tell them about it. So I would, as we move forward, if we move forward, I would propose adding that to the signage that would be on those tables. And maybe we could deal with some of the easiest things first. Table layout, we've addressed that a little bit, and I would certainly, I went by there this morning and saw the 3 tables in the one area, and of course nothing yet in the second area. But to me, that was the most comfortable configuration, leaving a lot of space in between those tables, lots of more open visual. Looks like Joe joined us. Welcome, Joe.
Can you actually hear me?
I can actually hear you. Are you home?
Well, not quite. I'm actually en route, about 10 minutes away. So
good for you. Well, thanks for joining us. So we've had our presentation. We're just starting to discuss the table layout. I don't know if you saw in the packet, but there was a little diagram showing 3 tables in the larger area and 1 in the smaller. And in our discussions, so far we've had Ms. Travis indicating that would be preferable to her, and I think Mike agreed with that. So Mike, your hand is up. Did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I just was going down the line of that you were going down, Susan, which is the fact that I feel that with that layout, with the 3 and the 1 table, it enhances that south area, the view, and it creates more of a visual and public access. So it creates more public access in general with that layout. So that was the number one, obviously, issue for me. And then the other thing that came up, and the applicant mentioned this, is the fact that we don't know who's going to be there, what retailers coming in. So again, it creates more access to them as well, even though we don't know who that's going to be yet. So I just think we ought to go down that line and cut it down a little. I kind of missed, I think it's on page number 24, that layout, but I missed it on my first go around. But I had actually redrew the table, so it did create 3 tables. So I didn't even know we were even considering that. So I had already gone down that path before I saw today staff's, it's on one photo on one page. So, because sometimes we lose that. So it was on the left side and it wasn't clearly out there, but I did also consider that on my own. So I just think the 3 and 1 would work better, create more access in general. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bill, do you have any comments on this?
Susan, do you want to do it like one category at a time?
I think so.
Okay.
I think, like I said,
I'm
start
fine.
with the easy stuff.
I'm fine with the 3 and 1.
Okay, excellent. And how about, as long as we're talking about it, the idea of having the tables stabilized in one place? So
In other words, fixed tables.
Affixed to the. Mm-hmm.
I think staff's recommended that, and I agree.
Okay, I do too. How about you, Joe?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I am delighted with the one area having 3 tables, the other area having 1 table. I mentioned it, but I would like the tables anchored and of course, sign somewhere evidence that say that no patron is necessary. And somebody had mentioned also, I think in one of the letters, about just making extra sure that there were adequate garbage containers, so I'd like to make sure we have that as well.
Yes. Okay, and I do believe that the applicant is responsible for the trash service and maintenance and cleanliness of that area. And then, Joe, I think you might have missed the brief discussion on the smoking issue that we might include on those tables in addition to being open to the public, that have the little no smoking sign on each table.
Oh, yeah. I did miss it, but I absolutely am in agreement. Yeah, it should be a no smoking area.
All right. So I think yes, Bill.
Let's see. So, Susan, one more condition around the public seating. Cindy mentioned the planters, and I think it's certainly important that we deal with that on a regular basis around public space for 2 reasons. One is sometimes the planters are used, I think, to try to privatize the space, and they create a kind of a barrier. My problem is, one, we don't want the space privatized. It has to be understood as public. The second thing is it adds to clutter, which I think Cindy also mentioned. So I'd like to put a condition in here that there needs to be a planting plan that would be submitted, and that could be reviewed by staff. And one of the things that I think staff's hoping to do is come up with more of a standards list. And I think all of these things might be a part of that standards list for public seating on the Embarcadero. But I do think it's important that we condition the fact that there should be a planting plan that staff can review and say yes or no to what would remain. One other thing is, I think also the idea of a kind of barriers that seem to be common at some of the restaurants. I think the city, again, by fixed seating, we don't really need the barriers. So I think there should be a limit on any kind of roping or barrier and planters in terms of trying to section off the public space.
I would prefer not to see any roping or barriers in this space at all. So,
yes.
Mike.
Yeah, and I agree with Bill. I think this area is going to give us an opportunity to try to get something really good done and do it right. So I think all of the suggestions so far, we're coming up with a good plan, at least for the front side of this. And hopefully we can use some of the standards that we come up with, like planners and fixed tables and things like that we can use along the Embarcadero. So I just hope we can set a standard for everything we're doing so that we're consistent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Building elevations. Number 2 on...
Maybe one thing, Susan, the umbrellas. Mm-hmm. We encouraged last time, I think it was a comment from one of the public comments, the idea of recognizable public umbrellas. Again, I think that's something that's pretty easy to do, and I've seen it in other cities where it can be a decorative pattern, stripes, polka dots, something recognizable. It could actually be something that says the Harbor Walk. It could be like a graphic. Again, I'd like to put that to staff to come up with some recommendations for overall guidelines for public areas. And that's something, again, that I think the commission could review at future meetings that would be able to apply to this project around the umbrellas, in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would like to see that as a future thing. I'm not sure at this point I would want to decide, choose a color, whatever. I do like the idea of affixing a logo, especially something that would say City of Morro Bay, Harbor Walk, I think is a great idea.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying relative to this project is that we would make it, I think these conditions would be subject to those recommendations by staff. So if they decide on an umbrella, we're not going to decide today. I'm saying put it in staff's court and see what they come back with. And I'm encouraging staff to bring this to commission at a later date where we could look at all these items as standards and guidelines, but that would apply to this project as well.
Okay. Does staff have any comment on that, or can we move along? Scott?
No, so I think that's a good idea. I mean, we talked about this, I think, briefly at the last meeting about coming up with a sort of list and have a policy memo that we kind of put on top of that. It's for the Planning Commission that would, call out the types of, furniture we want to see down on the waterfront, types of tables, umbrellas, those types of things, types of even planters and that type of stuff. So I think we're going to, my idea was to really come back at our next meeting and have the beginning of that conversation. So if we did as Vice Chair Roshan suggests, simply condition the project to adhere to the policy memo that the Planning Commission develops, I think that's sufficient. We'll certainly have enough time between now and when they come back in for their permits to complete that process. So I think it shouldn't be, a burden really on us. It shouldn't really be a burden on them. And I think we can do it in, a pretty quick fashion, probably a couple of meetings, and, certainly by the end of the year. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mike.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify that the page I really spent the most time on, and this gets back to what Scott's talking about, is page number 42. Page 42 had everything I was looking at, and on the frontscape, the streetscape, it has the tables, it has the umbrellas, it has the whole layout, the public access, the south view, the north view. So page 42 told the whole story. But I just wanted to clarify that it was page 42 that I was looking at, and I didn't realize that the optional table layout was on the left side, way on the left. So I kind of lost it. So I just wish it had been, more clear to me, because I found it my second go around. So I just want to clarify with staff that that's what I was talking about, page 42. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mike. Okay, are we ready to move on to building elevations? So this was with the addition of the adjacent windows on the west elevation, different plans for the door to open up that a little bit more, a recognition that depending on who their tenant might be, there might be revisions to where those windows are placed, how high, how far apart, but that they would attempt to have 15% of the wall surface as glass or clear, visible through. So I see you with your hand up, Mr. Roshan.
Thank you, Susan. Before we get into that, I did want to say that last Saturday, I went out to the site a second time. I had met with Kathy before, and the ex parte meetings was with Mr. Van Burden. And Paul was very nice, very generous with his time. He spent really over a half hour explaining his story, which is quite a story. He and his family's story on the wharf. And so I really wanted to make that public, but also say thank you to him. And so I wanted to mention that before we went too much further. In terms of the glass, again, thanks to the applicant, I think this is exactly the right response. I think the percentage is a good way to do it. I took the time to sort of study what the percentage meant, and I feel 15% is low in this case. So I would be prepared to move it forward with a 20% percentage, which I think is much more in keeping with the kind of guidelines I've seen over the years around public ways of this type. And it would be an area that would be defined really from the floor to the, I guess, to the eave. So that would be the area that it would be 20% of that would have to be transparent. So that would be my only adjustment to that, Susan.
Okay. I'll put a note here. Would you have, if there were a combination of windows and or mural type thing, would that make any difference? Just thinking, options for people.
My sense is that, again, I'm thinking of not just this project, but how every project along the Harbor Walk might want to be approached. Mm-hmm. For me, the 20% is a modest amount of glazing. I think quite often it'll be much larger than that.
Sure.
I would say it would be 20% minimum glazing indoors, and the mural would be encouraged. And I think in this case, a mural could be really, really a good feature along that blank wall. And so I guess I would say the 20% should stand on its own.
Okay. Would it be appropriate to ask Ms. Novak if she feels that that is a possibility? Thanks.
I think it would be something that we would like to take into consideration because, again, I think the major point that staff brought up as well was we do not know what kind of tenant is going to go in there. So we're going to have to be very conscientious about the, especially a west-facing glass and any tenant that would have merchandise that could be faded, that we would be concerned about that. So at this point in time, if the commission wants to do the 20%, then, please just put that in there and we'll have to consider it. And if we have any problems, we'll need to discuss it at a later point with the city council, or maybe even if we had to come back for a permit amendment, we could always consider that.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
Okay. I think that we might need some further discussion when we finally make the motion on that point.
Okay, we can reserve that for further discussion. All right. I think, anybody else have any comments on that issue? Nope. Okay. Moving on to the accessibility issue. The concern that whether or not it could meet accessibility requirements. Are you comfortable with the answers you got, Mr. Roshan?
So to make it clear, the ability to make it disabled accessible was never in question. It's how it would be done. Mm-hmm. And at this point, it is a conceptual plan, but it's also going to stand as a precise plan. And this is going to be where I'm going to want to make sure that we've got a pretty clear path to resolve with agreement from the applicant. If we're approving something that is helping them get through faster, both as a conceptual and a precise level, that we know what we're getting. My concern with the sloping of the deck was to make sure it really does serve us well as a plaza. And on Saturday, when I had the chance to talk with Paul, I expressed how excited I was that this is going to be the first really plaza space on the Harbor Walk. And thanks to him, he's doing doing it. You could have events in this, 20 foot by roughly, I'm saying 60, 70 foot wide space. It's really exciting to think of, a wedding on the pier or on the walk, or this is a unique space, which I think should be not only encouraged, but is going to change the nature of the walk. So how the elevations are done are important. It's not the accessibility. It's, are we creating a relatively flat plaza where you could have tables, chairs, etc. So my sense is that at this point, and again, it depends on the outcome as we negotiate this down with the applicant, I still would want to see if this is going to be a conceptual plan and the precise plan, that they would have to submit an elevation to staff for their approval. And I would think that one of the commissioners should take a look at it as well, because this now becomes a new threshold for the Harbor Walk. And how the Harbor Walk is sloped, I think, makes a difference to its success, its sense of continuity.
Okay. Mr. Graham, would you like to comment on that in terms of the process? Where you do look at and review these plans to make sure that they are fulfilling our visions for this area?
Yeah, so that happens sometimes. When I get very particular conditions from the commission, I will oftentimes poll the commissioner that made them when the plans come in and show what is supposed to address their concern, especially if I'm not sure that it actually does. But when people have very specific concerns, I will oftentimes show it to the commissioner that has those concerns, just to make sure that, we're all on the same page, because it's a phone call and a meeting, it doesn't take any time, so that's often what happens when there's a really specific, item that is, that's put in place by, typically one commissioner. If it's something that's generalized and we're just looking at like a landscape plan, that's not really a big deal. We would typically just do that on our own, or making sure you give direction related to a color change somewhere, a material change somewhere. We'll make sure that happens. But something as specific as Vice Chair Roshan suggested, related to looking at the finished surface to make sure that it's usable in a manner that he envisions, would be one of those types of things that I probably would reach out and say, this is what's being proposed. What do you think?
Okay, thank you. And Mike, I see your hand. Can I let Ms. Novak respond first to that direct?
Sure.
Thanks.
The way that we have the Harbor Walk proposed between the existing patio and the wharf is a combination of the fiberglass, grate, and composite decking. So those two materials obviously can be made as a flat surface, as we've seen the rest of the Harbor Walk up and down the waterfront done. So that's not a question, other than if there needs to be a slight slope to accommodate for the elevation change between the existing patio area in the back and the connection at Rose's. When I talked to the architect, he was talking that concrete area in there that would be at the foot of the wharf, if we have to add some more concrete in there to raise it up so that we can meet that level where the Rose's rampway and transition meets and the door for the new retail unit, that we would propose to put some new concrete in there so that we could raise that elevation. The big point I want to raise here with the commission is, and this might be the part of the discussion that you come up with the existing wharf, if you want us to retain the wharf and the wharf boards as is, you will not get a flat surface with those wharf boards. It's just inherent in that wood material. You're not going to get that. To get some sort of a flat surface, the direction that you're going, I think we would have to put in the fiberglass grating or a composite decking in there to get the flat surface. So I just wanted to raise that issue with you for your discussion, because that would be something that we would really need to know too from the commission's point of view.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mike.
Yeah, and I just would like to pony up Bill to go ahead and review that, because he is an architect and he's got an exact idea of what he's thinking about. And I think he would serve us well in reviewing that, if Bill's willing to do that.
Absolutely, I agree with you, Mike. Joe, do you have any comments on this?
Pretty much the same thing. I was always
certain that the area was going to be disabled accessible, and I would defer to Bill to approve the scheme that the applicant has that will satisfy the commission. I'm satisfied. If Bill's expertise is rendered, we'll be more than satisfied.
Excellent. All right. Okay, now we get into the big one. Are we ready? Take a breath, everybody. Preservation of the wharf. So we heard a lot of discussion, a lot of challenges. Certainly the hoist represents some issues in terms of the amount of space that it needs. If that continues to be there, it would really reduce the amount of open to the public space. And then, of course, there's just the issue of the cost of actually what would need to be done to maintain it. I wonder, Bill, since you did have some conversations with Mr. Van Beurden, if you have any new insights into all that question?
Sure, let me take a whack at it. Okay. And if I could, I'd like to recognize we did get two, I thought, very strong letters from the public regarding the preservation issues. And I wanted to say thank you to those people. I was going to take the time to read one paragraph of Betty Winholtz's letter because I thought it was especially well written. And I did go over these issues with Paul, and he was empathetic to the idea of our maritime heritage. He did certainly understand that. Betty says the wharf is an opportunity to exhibit our maritime heritage where it really happened and with the equipment that made it happen. Very different from a two-dimensional picture, plaque, or displaced piece of machinery in a museum. This wharf is an opportunity to retain a feature that is no longer common in Morro Bay, but unique to Morro Bay. This wharf is an opportunity to have the Harbor Walk be more about, to be about more than shops, a surprise find to visitors walking by. I thought that was really well written. In the specifics, I do think that the hoist is problematic. So what I would like to suggest for me to pass this today, in my opinion, is that we would get a commitment from the applicant to do a plan that looks at saving the planking and the edge curbs, the like bench-like curbs that wrap around the edge, and basically restore it to where their proposed plan is. So not extend it so that we're not asking them to save the other piers that are out there. This would not change their plan. What it would do is simply involve taking that existing fabric, that existing material, and reusing it there so that the wharf did become recognizable. I think that I'd be willing at this point to move the project forward if the applicant agrees to a study that looks at that. And I guess my sense of the hoist would be if someone would come forward before this all comes to pass, and there was an opportunity to save it somewhere for a later date, that would be valuable and worthwhile. I'd say the last thing is that this idea of memory of our heritage is something that's happening everywhere. And the reason that I'm bringing such, I think, earnest concern is once it's gone, it's gone. And these things, even modest efforts, sometimes I've seen make a substantial difference. So my proposal at this point would be to replank just that area that is where the historic pier is now, wharf is now, to where the applicant is proposing it. Nothing new, nothing structurally new. With the historic planking and the curb. That would be it, and then put a question mark on the hoist.
So just so I'm clear, we need a picture up here in front of us. Would you then have a kind of discontinuous surface for this area. So you would have the fiberglass grate perhaps on either side, but in where it is now, you'd continue to have that planking.
I think so. And that would be the thing that would have to be, a plan would have to be submitted, staff would have to look at it, but that would be where I would encourage them to start, so that there would be an identifiable area where the pier used to be. Even though it would be shorter, it would still be recognizable as a maritime piece of maritime history.
So just could I have a question to staff? And then I do see you, Mike, and I see Kathy's hand up too. To just immediately to the south of the area we're considering, there's like a little finger deck that goes out that's also that wood wharf material. Is that staying in this proposal? Is that material, is that still being wood? It's kind of on the northwest corner of Dutchman's.
The plans, and Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, the plans show or indicate in writing that all of that area, was going to be, the timbers that are there were going to be replaced.
Okay.
But now the condition says, no, don't do that. Use some of the boards that were going to be disassembled and demolished from the portion of the wharf that's going to be removed, and use it in that area where they're talking about replacing the boards now. And maybe some of those boards are fine the way that they are because they're in that area now anyway. So it might not be a whole lot of work, or maybe it is, and maybe they can salvage some of the boards from the other portion of it to replace the ones that aren't in good shape. But I think that's probably what we're looking at. At least that was my thought when I heard Vice Chair Roshan explaining it. I could be wrong, and if I am, please correct me. But that was kind of what I was thinking it would look like.
Yes.
I can share a zoomed in of this site plan on the screen if that's helpful.
Okay.
I'm sorry, was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Hold on, sorry. I just zoomed in on this. Here we go. So is this helpful to see this image?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, should I address this, Susan?
Hang on one second, though. In the far left-hand side of the screen, keep going, left, 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 up, there's a little finger dock here. And that's wood planking. Is that staying as wood planking?
It is. It's off the lease site, so it's not part of the project change.
Okay, just curious in terms of consistency of materials and so on, or preserving some of the older kinds of features that are here.
Yeah, they're showing existing wood wharf decking.
Nice.
Here.
Okay. All right, so back to Bill.
So, this drawing is really helpful, and I think what I'd be willing to support is where you see the 21-foot 10-inch, that's roughly the width of the existing wharf. It extends out, you can see the dimension, 6 feet 5 inches. I'm suggesting we don't do anything to change their structural, their map. All we do is suggest that area, the 21-foot 10 inches wide, from the railing all the way back to the building, would be, they would use the existing decking, and they would then add the curb, which is there now, at the 6'5" across the 2110, and then down on the, I'm going to guess that's the west or north face, to the building edge. So it's just that isolated area, and that means that more than probably 10 to 20% of the wharf would not be used, which would allow for damaged wood. I think that would give us some margin for loss to make that plan work.
Okay. And now, Mike, you've been waiting patiently.
If you want to defer to the applicant first, then I can speak after her.
Okay, thank
Because I
you.
think she wanted to say something, and then I'll speak after her.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Novak, maybe you could address how and whether those boards could be reused?
Sure. One thing I want to point out real quickly is that on the A1.1, the existing fish processing wharf area, the boards actually do go over the lease line just a little tiny bit, so that those would just need to be cut back. So I just want to point that out. And then the other thing is, with the existing wood decking, there probably won't need to remove the decking for any particular reason. It's already down there now, because the three piles that you see that are going to be remaining and repaired, if they use an epoxy jacket system, you don't have to take off the wood deck boards to access the piles, because the jacket just wraps around the pile, and there's an epoxy grout that's poured into there, and then therefore secures the pile altogether and encapsulates all the wood pile that's left in there. We use that system for the pile repair under the Dutchman restaurant, and it worked very well, especially in areas where you've got rock riprap and things like that you have to be concerned about. That's a better way to go for the repairs. So I'm seeing this is that if you want to leave the existing wharf wood boards, we could just don't touch it. We just repair the pile and the under structure, beams, or whatever we need to support the wharf, and then we will run links between the wharf and the existing patio area to support the new harbor walk section that doesn't exist now. Mm-hmm. And then also in the old patio area, we're going to leave the wood deck there as well. So the only thing we're talking about then would be the wood composite and the fiberglass grate in between the existing wharf and the patio area. The other wharf boards that come off from the rest of the wharf, when that's demolished, we can certainly try to salvage what we can and give it to the Maritime Museum. If they can take it and hold on to the wood, we're happy to do that. So hopefully that will answer part of the question. And I just want to bring up the other agency item. I don't think that we will have any problems with the other agencies, because it's an existing wood wharf, and if we're not touching the decking, I think we'll be okay without having the other agencies have any problems. It's typically any kind of new area that's covering over water that they want to see the fiberglass grate going in to allow the sunlight to go through. So hopefully, Bill, that will answer all your questions, and fine with leaving the existing wood wharf the way it is. I mean, cut off the rest of the balance of it.
Yeah, Kathy, that works for me. Yes.
Really good to hear. How about Mike?
Yeah, and I just wanted to have Ms. Novak talk, because she answered just about everything I was going to ask, but it's also in lines with what Bill wanted, which was to preserve history, material that we won't see again once we take it out. And that, in fact, that was one of our top 5 goals and objectives as a commission that we gave to the council. So I think we're going right down the path we wanted to go. So thank you very much, Bill, for presenting that and proposing that.
Thanks.
Great. Okay.
I think Joe has a question, Susan.
Oh, sorry, Joe. I'm looking over at my notes. Yes.
That's completely understandable. Well, first of all, I'm delighted with the information that Kathy just supplied. That's wonderful. I have to say that every time I thought about this issue over the last 2 weeks, it struck me as ever more essential that we do something to preserve that docking area. I mean, I'm starting to think of it as living history that deserves to continue. So I'm just delighted with the way this is going. I think I missed out on in fact, I know I missed out on Kathy's report that probably discussed the complexities and the cost of including the hoist as part of this preservation. Is that true? Is there some discussions about why the hoist might be, a bridge too far, or am I assuming something?
Well, yes, you did miss some stuff. It takes up a lot of space. You would need to put in protections for the public. Keep in mind that this has been basically a private wharf for commercial fishermen only. It hasn't been for the general public. So there are safety issues with that. Also, if they remove the end part that's structurally not sound, they would have to pull the hoist back in, and that would drastically reduce the amount of space. And you just wouldn't have that open plaza area anymore back there. So, you know, it's a piece of equipment that is interesting, but perhaps, you know, it's outlived its usefulness, certainly in that area. I wonder if it, well.
So I concur again with Bill, as it's becoming my habit, that we save this piece of equipment, put it someplace, and maybe sometime in the future we can find a spot, albeit not in its original location, but somewhere where it would do some good in terms of keeping alive the history of Laurel Bay. I think that's great. Now, the only other thing, I was a little distracted when the explanation of this saving the planks. Yeah, that was to be a recommendation. Could you guys go over that again? As to, I gathered that we as a board weren't going to decide that it must be this way, but we were going to recommend it, or what exactly was the proposal?
I think we could propose that they keep the existing boards as the wharf as it is. They will reduce the length of it and try and preserve those boards, see if the Maritime Museum is interested in doing something with them, or if they could be used in some other part of some project. But I think we could make that proposal. Or as part of.
Yeah, I was offering, Joe, that the way that we would move it tonight would be if the applicant agrees to that. And it sounds to me like Kathy believes we could leave those existing plankings. If they would agree to reassemble the edge curb, which stands on three sides, then I think we've got a proposal that I could support. And that would be the way that I would want to write the condition.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that's fair, but we should try to use the weight of the commission to actually ensure that this actually happens. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. Kathy, you have your hand up, or is that left up from before? Did you have a comment?
No, I wanted to ask about when you're talking about leaving the curb, we have railings proposed around the wharf. Now, Bill, how do you envision that we're having railings and the curb?
You would do both. And so you would put the curb inside the railings. So the railings would go on the outside of the wharf, to protect anybody. And then the curb would sit inside, almost be usable like a bench. But it would, I think that would really recall, the old wharf, the maritime heritage. And at this point, I think, there might be some concerns as you develop a plan, but I would start from that point, and then if there are issues that we can't solve, we can always talk about it with staff. And again, I'm happy to be a part of that. But for me to begin the effort, I think it has to start there so that we have a substantial piece of the historic fabric.
Okay, terrific. I just wanted to get that clarification so that I knew exactly what you were talking about with the railings proposed. Thank you.
Joe?
I'd like to add to that. I think that curb is just a wonderful element of authenticity. It's sort of the icing on the cake of the project. And so I think it really should be there as well.
Great. Okay. Any other comments? I would like to say one thing that I sort of feel a little remiss from both meetings. I would really like to express my appreciation to the applicant for bringing this project forward, easily a decade ahead of schedule to get this section of the Harbor Walk completed. I think they've worked really hard to sort of answer the issues of consistency with the Downtown Waterfront Strategic Plan and the challenges of dealing with environmental issues with Coastal Commission and eelgrass, with our concerns about the history that's involved, opening up sight lines and access to the waterfront. Folks who have these leases are responsible to so many masters. And this whole project except for a very small portion of it, is really, the return on investment is goodwill. It is not going to, reflect in their bottom line. And I just really want to say how much I appreciate that they are bringing this forward early, because the more sections of this harbor walk that get completed, the more of a real joy it is to walk along that waterfront all the way out to Morro Rock. It's pretty spectacular, and I'm excited to see this section completed. And the other thing that I hope all of you had a chance to listen in on the city's goal-setting workshop. If not, take an opportunity to, it's a couple hours worth, to really listen to their conversations. One of the things the facilitator talked about was when we have these issues that come up, and in this case, she was talking about putting government at the center of it to solve all the problems, that rather than doing that, you put the issue at the center and think about all these other groups and agencies and parts of our community that can help. And I think that sort of applies here too. If the issue is that this dock is important to people, I think we've done a really good job of sort of coming up with ideas and collaborating on how to preserve parts of it. And perhaps the community could come up, adopt a dock, adopt a hoist and come up with ways to think about preserving it. I know Cayucas has made quite an effort to do that with their Veterans Building. And I think it can't be the responsibility of any one person or one agency or one part of our government. It has to be up to all of us to make these kinds of things happen. So thanks to the applicant, their agents, and certainly to staff for working so hard on this. And if there aren't any other comments, how about Mr. Roshan always has a comment, and maybe you can even give us a...
We're not quite done.
You're not quite done. Okay, keep going.
It's a modest point, but it's important to get it in the conditions. One of the things that we want to make sure starts to happen is to get this idea of continuation and continuity, that the lighting actually be consistent. I don't mean the light fixtures as much as I mean the color of the lighting, the lamps themselves. And the applicant has proposed, I looked at it and I believe it's a cold light at the Kelvin that they proposed. I think if we go up to 3,000, we can get to a warm light. I would leave that determination to staff, but I think it's very important that from now on, every project start to have the same color light along the harbor walk, so that instead of going from cold to warm, they're consistent. I very much like the light fixtures that the applicant has proposed. Would be happy to see them become a standard, but my biggest concern is the color of the light. The last thing I did want to say, if I could add on to yours, Susan, is that I did want to thank Paul very much. The fact that he took the time to come down there, listen, work with us, the fact that I think we've got a solution that actually will keep the historic piece. It's a big deal. And the fact that this is going to be the first event space on the harbor walk, equally fantastic. So, yes, the commission's very thrilled with what the applicants offer.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. Joe.
Oh, that's interesting with respect to the light. I hadn't really thought about that. I like individuality, if you will, on the harbor walk in terms of the visual presentation. But I think I probably would draw an exception to the light. And I guess thinking about it, too much variation in the, whatever you want to call it, the illumination or it might be a distraction. So I would want to make sure, though, I know we have some lighting ordinances in effect, and I wouldn't want to be redundant. I just don't remember exactly what that entails. I know there are
night sky issues. And,
yeah. So I really don't know if that's adequately addressed. Probably not, because Bill's talking about the color of light, and I don't think the ordinance really addresses the color of light, whether it's cold or warm.
I see Mr. Graham's face. Maybe he has an answer for you.
Yeah, I was just going to concur with Commissioner Ingraffia that the ordinance doesn't go into that level of detail, meaning what the Kelvin level is for the lighting or that type of thing. But cities regularly have standards for these types of things. Not an uncommon thing. I've seen them all over the place. So coming up with something like that in our future conversations is a worthwhile idea, I think.
Well, I will tell you, Mr. Roshan, I have one of those lamps that has 3 different outlets, and I had to replace a bulb and just, went and bought some light bulbs. 2 of them are kind of that blue-white light, and one is the warm light, and it is just the worst kind
it's not good.
glaring. It's like, wait, what did I do? So I appreciate that, even if it's a gradual change maybe, but that kind of glaring, difference in the temperature of the lighting could be significant. So
yeah, I would agree. I would concede conformity when it comes to the temperature of lighting.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Do we need to build a detailed proposal here?
I think we might.
For a motion?
Yeah.
Do you want to try to do it together, Susan?
I trust you, but yes, let's try and do it together. Let's see.
So I think we go back to the seating where we agreed to, Cindy, 3 and 1. Is that right?
Yes.
We agreed to fixed tables.
Yes.
We're agreeing to staff will define an option on the umbrellas.
Yes.
In the future.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at some sort of planting plan that will define the pots and the planters for those 2 areas, with the objective of being as clutter-free as possible and as open and receptive as public space could be.
Could we also include having no smoking signs on those tables?
Yes.
Thank you. And then we had the percentage of
glass and glazing. Which would include the as long as the doors are glass, it includes the doors.
Okay.
And I had suggested we go to 20%. After I studied it, I think it's not a high percentage, but I think it's a workable one. And to help Kathy, this doesn't have to be done until they know who their tenant is.
Great. Okay. One of my thoughts was that you could do something like clerestory windows along the top if you needed to protect merchandise, something like that too.
Yeah. And there's a lot of ways to do that also with tinted glass and films. So that can be easily addressed.
Okay. And then we would have you check in with staff on the final plan for the connectivity between Roses and how that...
Yes, so that would be the actual slope of the deck. I don't think it's complicated, but I do think we should be doing that every time we approve a portion of the Harbor Walk, and I think we start here. So even though this is a conceptual plan, it is going to act as the precise plan. So I think, again, I'd be happy to review it, and it'll go through staff.
Okay. And I think the recommendation on the wharf was to preserve the existing planking and edge curves and add an edge curve on the west side.
I think the way it might be written, Cindy, tell me, is that we're keeping the existing planking in place in the area that's described to be saved. The addition would be taking the curbs and relocating them to that footprint, with guardrails on the outside. So it would have guardrails and the curbs.
Can you say those last 2 sentences again?
that I think what Kathy wanted to do was we're comfortable with keeping the existing planking in place to the footprint described in the proposed project. They would relocate the curbs, which run along the perimeter of the existing wharf, to this new footprint, this new plan. And guardrails would be put along the edges, like the same detail as before, the edges of the wharf with the curbs inside the guardrails. Does that sound right, Cindy?
Okay. And I see your hand, Mike, but let's see if we can finish this and then we'll have discussion. So anything?
And then the only other thing would be the lighting, I guess, that, that staff recommend a consistent Kelvin for the Harbor Walk.
Okay. All right, Mike. So that's our motion. Do we have a second?
What about a hoist?
Oh, the hoist.
Thank you.
Yeah, we would.
So maybe, Scott, you could help us with the hoist a little bit. I'm hoping that we can take some time to see, can the hoist find a home? Joe, you were a champion for this. Right now, we don't know where that would be, but we need some time to find it and see if it exists.
Maybe that's.
Is there a better way to write that?
Could we talk with Eric Endersby about that?
Well, we certainly can. I think, how we would do is if the applicant offers, the hoist up for preservation, and we, really be looking to find somebody to take that on, even to the point where we maybe as a city potentially could look into storing it for a while so we could keep it for a little while, because people will know that we have it. At least folks that are interested in that type of thing will know that we have it, as long as we get the word out there a little bit.
I have plenty of room in my backyard if somebody wants to move it there. It's all sand.
If perhaps we could, if it's the Maritime Museum, perhaps, at least it's worth an inquiry.
They weren't sure they had the space for it, I think is what I heard. But I think that's certainly more of a discussion that could be had. So we had a second on this?
Yeah, Susan, that was me as a second.
Okay,
I think we caught it.
So now we can have more discussion on it. Thanks.
Yeah, Susan, I just wanted to, because I think I was one of the people who wanted to continue this item. I just wanted to say that by continuing this item, we've gone from a concept of what, our street side and our bay side, the Embarcadero side of this part of town, as well as the bay side of what we were trying to, or at least what we were thinking about. We've gotten down to details to the point where we've created guidelines and standards that we'd like to other projects like this to use. So I think we were trying to go there and trying to more specifically identify the things we wanted to see as a planning commission, all the way to planters, signage, lighting, glass. I mean, these were all things we were thinking about at the last meeting, but weren't ready to make a decision on. So I just wanted to thank the applicant, again, like you have already, for coming back and giving us the opportunity to do some of the things we have to do as a planning commission to make sure we are being consistent and trying to, and the other thing I'd like to say is not only that, being consistent as a planning commission, but also doing one of our top priorities of historical preservation. So we're now preserving our history. Again, we weren't ready for that at the last meeting. So I'd just like to state that, this is why I wanted to continue it last time. And I think what we've done is move forward a better project than what we had last time. And in addition, we've minimized the impacts. We always knew there was going to be impacts in the front. So by going from a 4-table, 2-table setup to a 3-table, 1-table setup, again, we were able to minimize the impact of the neighbors and the next neighbor that will be leasing in that area. So again, these are all things we weren't really ready to deal with at the last meeting that we've now gone to. So those are just my comments for now. The fact that we were able to deliver something that's more specific and fits better and is a better project overall. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mike. All right. Are we ready to call the question here? Yep. All right. Ms. Jason. Or we could have Scott do it. Oh, there she is.
Sorry. I'm sorry, I was taking notes so feverishly and I missed who made the motion.
Mr. Roshan made the motion and Mr. Rodriguez made the second.
Apologies.
It's okay.
Commissioner Roshan.
Yes, and thank you for your help, Cindy.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yes, and thank you for your help, Cindy.
Commissioner Ingraffia.
Yes, enthusiastically, and thank you, Cindy.
Chairperson Stewart.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We don't need a break, do we? I mean, we're almost done, right? Okay, good.
Yep.
Moving on to new business, we have none. Unfinished business, nothing is listed here. Planning Commissioner comments and future agenda items. Mr. Roshan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I've got 2 items for you, Susan. One, and I think this is an important one for us. I'd like to propose a subcommittee of the commission that could work on the master plan and the Vistra project. I think as this looms larger, my experience is for us to get engaged early is very helpful and constructive. I think we could be a support for staff. We'll try hard not to get in the way, but I think it would be. It would be a really valuable thing for us to initiate that. So I guess I'm asking Scott, do we need council review on this?
No, I think you're fine forming the subcommittee. This is an active thing we're working on in-house. We have the application here. So I think you're fine. Just get a concurrence and another, on forming the committee and who's going to be on it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on it. I think this is. I'd like to spend time. I think it's a major big deal.
I'd be interested in working on that with you, Bill, unless someone else has a more urgent interest. I don't see anybody's hands up. I've certainly done a lot of additional meetings and work on that, attended some of their presentations, discussions in the Government Affairs Committee about and with them. So I would, maybe that's something you and I can get together on.
That sounds really fun. Thanks.
I think it could be fun. It's an interesting project.
So second thing is the smokestacks. And I'm going to propose for a discussion item only that at our next meeting we agendize the smokestacks, that we offer the public an additional chance to speak, to make their opinions heard. And I think it's important that the commissioners have a chance to speak as well. I think this will, in the end, even though no action would be taken, I think it still would be an important support, for planning and the council. So I guess I'd propose that we agendize the stacks for a discussion item at the next meeting.
Were you able to participate in that event that the city?
Yes, went through the PowerPoint and heard most. And one of the things that I was concerned about is that the public questions were actually somewhat limited. I think they had maybe a technical problem or something. So I'm sort of hoping that the commission, don't know how many people show up, but at least we'd be making that opportunity available to everybody through the commission.
Would you see doing that with a facilitator or with somebody who has that background and can answer the technical questions about the stacks and, the costs and all of those kinds of issues? Or is this more emotional kind of thing?
Scott, do you have a response?
No, I think about the best I can do for you is, there's not enough time really to put that together, given the timing for when staff reports and stuff would be due, and given the desire to have it come back at the next meeting. So really, I think it would be a discussion item for the commission to talk about. I would certainly provide you basically about a one-page staff report that links to the presentation that was done previously. So it have all that information attached to it. That is on the website. It has the videos on there there as well, so I could attach that on there, and then you could kind of go from there. So at least you have the information that was presented at that previous meeting to use as a starting point for your discussion, I think. Would that be sufficient?
I think so. And, again, this is an opportunity for discussion. It's not going to be exhaustive. So, and I think it's more important that we do it than, we don't have the time to go into all that depth, which has already happened. So this becomes a discussion that might focus on specific things that they didn't have the time in that earlier presentation.
Okay. Mike, you have your hand up?
Yeah, and I concur with Bill only because I was in Morro Bay this past weekend. I got there Thursday and I left Monday, but at least 10 people came up to me with this article that appeared in the Morro Bay Life. And they said on here, it says power plant smokestacks, leave them or not. And at the very last paragraph says the city plans to hold more hearings on this issue over the next year in anticipation of December 2022 deadline to give Vistra an answer, keep them or not. Now, everybody's asking me what's going on with the smokestacks. And I read the article and I said, I don't know. And they said, you're a planning commissioner. And I said, well, so that's why I'm agreeing with Bill. I don't know what's going on with the smoke. I did listen in on that 3-hour meeting that had almost 300 participants. So I only got so much information there, but I think there's a lot of confusion right now as far as what's going on. But I think the Planning Commission should engage. So I agree with Bill. That's our job. Thank you.
And Joe.
Yeah, I would agree too. And I listened to that presentation a few weeks ago, and I was struck by there's relatively few numbers that were provided and few numbers that are really relevant. It strikes me that it's, the discussions are going to revolve around things like practicality and actually just plain old values. And, you don't have to be a technical expert to comment on those. So I would support this very much.
Okay. Yeah, I do think it's important to allow the public to have an opportunity to hear as much as they can in facts and have the opportunity to express their concerns and questions and so on. So, and, as Mike said, it's a year that we will hopefully be having more hearings and discussions and information about this. So.
And it might be important for all the commissioners to look at that PowerPoint in advance.
Yes.
If any of us didn't see it, I think that would be helpful too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even review it a second time, 3 hours out of your life. I think a lot can be missed. And I found it actually a really interesting meeting. And I thought the facilitator did a really good job of...
It's actually a pretty big deal when you think about it.
It's huge. It is huge. Yeah. I would add in just, as a commissioner comment, again, hopefully the public is out there enjoying our meetings and our conversations and wanting to be part of it. I don't know if we've had any people applying for the commissioner position, but I hope we get some more applicants. So we have some interest out there. It's a good group and it has some important topics and issues ahead of us. The other thing, if you did listen to the goal setting meeting, and if you haven't, I would strongly recommend the commissioners listen to that and anybody in the public to, again, another excellent facilitator, I thought, and very thoughtful comments from our council. But I will say I did not hear any of them mention the historic preservation ordinance. And that was the top recommendation of this commission. It's not in there. So if that's something we care about, you might want to write a letter or listen to that meeting and see where it might apply. Maybe there is a place to slot this in, and I have to look at that a little more closely myself. Whether it's part of environmental justice, I don't know, but it just wasn't there at all. And I do think it's a quick win. And I also think if we had it in place, certain other things might be easier to address, like preservation of wharfs, preservation or not of stacks. You know, what is important to us as a community and our history, because we need to go a little bit beyond CEQA. We need to go beyond what the state says, because most of what we have doesn't qualify, but it may qualify for us as a community. So listen for that, if you would, and see where maybe we could make some progress on that. Mike, you're muted, Mike.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Scott a question, but I know we've all been invited to participate in a tour of the power plant, so I'm going to be part of that. I'm excited about that. So I think this gets back to what we were just talking about being engaged, because I think Morro Bay is in a mode of change. So the Planning Commission can be a huge asset, a huge tool, a working group of people who focus on issues. So that's number one, my comment. But the other one would be for Scott in particular would be on housing. The governor is signing so many bills so fast and giving so much money out to those takers who want it to build the housing, affordable, this kind of housing, that kind of housing. We know R1's no longer on the, single residential is no longer available, but I just want Scott to give us, if we could at the next meeting, give us an overall perspective of all of these laws, how we can tap into that money, because that money's not going to last very long. First come, first served. There's some cities that are already lined up at the Capitol asking for the money the governor's giving away, literally giving away. So I just wanted Scott to chime in on how we can be more proactive. Again, as a planning commission, we have a housing element. Right? We want to build X number of homes by a certain year. So we should start being more proactive. I feel I haven't heard that yet. But again, that's a planning commission function dealing with the housing element of our general plan. So I'd like to be more engaged that way as well. Scott, do you have any?
Sure. Yeah, no, Commissioner Rodriguez, absolutely. So that money, you signed a bill to the tune of about $15 billion. And it's allocated in different buckets. And those different buckets will be administered through several different departments in the state, and they're coming up with what that plan looks like. Like the last round of housing grants that we went and got, and we're still working on housing element implementation stuff, came through the Department of Housing and Community Development. And so, we got about $160,000, in that, and we're working on that right now. While that money municipality signed it, there's no process for allocation of those funds yet. That hasn't come out yet. We are fully aware that the money is out there. It'll just depend on, when they come out with the parameters for applying for that, and when they let us know that the grants are available, and exactly what they're going to be available for. Because what will happen is they'll have more specificity on what gains priority in the different buckets. That's always kind of how the grants come out. They'll have more specificity once they release the notice of availability for those. So
I'd be interested in I started digging into the SB 9 I think it is, and I'm assuming we will look more at that when we get into our zoning code. But I would like a little more clarity on things like lot line issues, and how do they really mean there is no lot line at all that you have to respect in terms of the parameters of a second unit and all that kind of thing. So maybe just a overview of that.
Yeah, certainly happy, as we get a little bit further along in this, to bring this before the Planning Commission as a discussion item. It's not going to be at the next meeting.
No, that's okay.
We have that one's full, and you're going to have a pretty good discussion item on, starting the stuff on the waterfront, right? So we're going to be having that at the next meeting. But I'm certainly happy to, schedule one in the future. I'm actually expecting to have to give a similar presentation to the City Council. So I'm waiting a little more direction from that. I know the mayor was going to talk with our city manager about that, I believe, so about bringing something along those lines forward. So I'm sort of waiting to see where that comes out at.
Okay.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that we need to talk about, and we need to get clarity on it. So.
It's probably one of the most major pieces of planning legislation in my professional career. It's a pretty big deal.
It is, and it's long and complicated. So, like, putting a presentation together is going to be fairly long. And looking through it, and I've kind of started outlining what that might look like. And it's lots of slides. And I've heard a couple of different, sat through a couple of different presentations on it now from other entities, and they had a lot of slides too. So,
Okay.
It's not the greatest way to do things, but in order to kind of get all the concepts out there in front of you, you kind of have to have enough. So that's the one takeaway I have from the couple of different like webinars I've sat through on it so far. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question, Susan. Scott, so when you do give that presentation to the council, maybe you could give us a heads up and we can listen in on the gist of it, you know what I mean? And then we could work on our part of it as a planning commission. So I'm just thinking out of the box here. How can we become more efficient and do our role and as far as the planning commission and trying to fulfill our housing element requirements and what the goals of the city of Morro Bay are that way. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'll wait for, director comments.
We could move into director comments, I think.
Okay. We will be bringing, Cindy and I are working on it right now. I've mentioned it before, bringing forward the draft zoning code. It was about, 85% baked before, and then we set it down to bring forward the GPLCP when we took over management of that in-house. So that'll be brought forward. It's going to include some of this stuff too. We're going to have to incorporate it in there, and we'll be having those conversations with Martha Miller, our consultant. On what that looks like. So we have lots of things that are coming forward to you that are got lots of meat to them for sure.
Great. All right. Any other comments? Bill?
Oh, no, just
you're
I
waving.
thought we were saying goodbye.
Okay. I think we may be there then. Scott has nothing else to add. We can adjourn this meeting. Our next meeting will be October 19th, 2021 at 6:00 via teleconference. And will we have a new commissioner by then? Maybe.
Yeah, the recruitment ends on the 15th, so...
Oh, no, so they'll have to do interviews, and then, okay, so we will still be 4 of us.
Hopefully by our first meeting in November, we...
There you go. All right. All right, everybody, have a good couple of weeks.
Night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks
for making it, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.